Paul, the apostle, his whole life was turned around when he was on the road to Damascus. And through that experience, when he encountered the risen Christ, that really changed his whole perspective on his Jewish belief. It became the key to understanding the Old Testament. So really we see that not just his apologetics, but Paul's whole theology and whole ministry was shaped around his encounter, shaped by and around his encounter with the risen Christ. And that also then shaped his way of arguing, his way of presenting the gospel of Jesus Christ as the truth. And that was done in a number of ways. First of all, we see, as is reflected in 1 Corinthians 15, which in fact is one of the absolutely earliest texts in the New Testament. We read about that. Paul said he received, just after his conversion, the tradition, the oral tradition, that Jesus he died, was buried, he rose again, and he showed himself to the disciples. And that shaped his presentation of the gospel. The death, the burial, the resurrection, and the appearances. And of course, the center of all that is the empty tomb. He was buried, the tomb was empty, and he appeared for the disciples. There we see how the whole thing turns around. And again, it's the Damascus experience that is there and shapes his whole approach to apologetics. And when we then read the Acts of the Apostles, we see that Paul always emphasizes who Jesus is as the one fulfilling the Old Testament when he encounters Jews as Messiah or the prophecies, and then as the one who is actually holding the whole universe in his, in himself, in his fullness. So it's like Paul is arguing either from the Old Testament or from creation, from general revelation, from the shared reality of us all. And whether it's the one way or the other, it always centers on Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus, and how that presents a wonderful evidence, a wonderful confirmation from the Heavenly Father himself, saying, my son was dead, I raised him up. And the fascinating thing is, when we think about it, the resurrection of Jesus is in some way very implausible, because it's a miracle. It's really something that we wouldn't expect. But then on the other hand, if it's God who created the world, who actually rose Jesus from the dead, then it's every reason to expect that he has the power to do that. So what we see the whole time, Paul's thinking is shaped, and his life is shaped around the resurrection of Jesus.